Welcome back to Checkpoint here on KTN News. It's time for our weekly segment, Lay of the Land. And tonight, we're not crunching numbers as we ordinarily do every Sunday. However, we are having a look at the 2017 presidential election petition. And in looking back at what transpired in that election, we'll be also considering the recent developments and how those could potentially impact the August polls. And so we will take a look at some of the key, especially documents and things you need to have in consideration and put at the back of your mind, because you'll be hearing a lot of that counting down to August the 9th. So we look at the presidential election petition, remember in 2017 that annulled the presidential election, the election of Uhuru Kenyatta. And we had a total of 40,883 polling stations countrywide. As it stands now, IEBC is yet to announce the total number of polling stations. But if the past is anything to go by, from 2013 to 2017, we had an increment of 10,000 polling stations countrywide. The projection by IEBC is that we're likely to see the same to around 52,000. However, the exercise of the cleaning up of the voters register is going on. You saw those 200,000 dead voters, the duplicated registrations as well. That's all been cleaned up, and after it's done, we'll have clarity on that. But I just want to give us a quick reminder of these three forms, statutory forms that are crucial in the running and management of the presidential election and how the same is relayed to the country. So you have Form 34A. Now, this is the tabulated results of presidential election by presiding officers at the polling stations. So, for instance, in 2017, each of these 40,000 plus polling stations had a presiding officer. And after the vote count is completed, then the same is recorded on a Form 34A. Now, other than having the total number, of course, of votes in that registered voters in that each polling station around the country, you also have in there the spoil votes, and after that, sign off by all agents involved in the election. Then you have the Form 34B. So after these forms leave the presiding officer at the polling station, they then go to the constituency returning officer. So this is a collation of results from all the polling stations within a constituency. The same is filled by what we call a constituency, or what is referred to as a constituency returning officer. Again, the collation of this to the extent of the presidential election is then goes to Form 34C. This is the instrument, a document if you like, in which the final result is recorded. And the presidential returning officer, that's the chairperson of the IEBC, then makes a declaration. So that's the kind of flow in as far as the result path for the election. Now, what are some of the issues that emerged from the results and the presidential petition and the subsequent judgment in 2017? Remember those that scrutiny that was ordered by the Supreme Court after prayers made by the petitioners. It was granted to scrutinize some of the documents it raised issues on, and one of them was the 34As. So a total of 4,229 forms were scrutinized. And what emerged from that is many of them were not stamped, others were unsigned by the presiding officer, and others were photocopies. Remember, it's the originals that count in as far as these elections are concerned, and for authenticity as well purposes. Now, when announcing results, IEBC in the last election had not received results from 11,883 polling stations and 17 constituency tallying centers. Again, this was one of the huge glaring issues that led up to and informed the nullification of that election, because the question was, at the time of announcing a winner, how is it they did not have this number of results coming in, or having a look and being able to verify before the declaration. Finally, on the Form 34A, there was an IEBC in disregard of Form 34A, according to their counsel during that petition, was in compliance with what they said the minor KI judgment all the way from the High Court to the Court of Appeal. And at the time, controversially, sensationally described the figures we're seeing from the Form 34A as mere statistics. Again, this was one of the huge issues of concern in that petition. To the extent of the constituency tallying center, the Form 34B, you had 290 forms used to declare the results. However, 59 out of the 56 had no security features. Remember, in elections, at least we saw a lot of that in the 2017 election, and IEBC has said we'll witness the same in this election. Both the ballot papers and these forms have security features, quite a number of layers of features, and that is just to ensure that credibility and also security of the process all the way from the beginning, the voting, so you cannot sneak in ballot papers, but also of this form. So this was found, again, a glaring issue at the time. And the final document that the IEBC chair, the presidential returning officer, used to announce the winner of the presidential election then, according to the judgment by the Supreme Court, bore no watermark and serial number. Now this again glaring. Now this will be a huge issue around those forms, because remember, our elections, according to law, are to be electronically the results transmitted. So at the polling stations, the presiding officer there simultaneously transmits the results and the forms both to the constituency tallying center and to the national tallying center. So some of the issues we are seeing emerge, some of them have been raised by the players, is are we ready to ensure the problems witnessed in the last election are not repeated in this one? But this is something else that emerged from the 2 days before the election in 2017. IEBC said it was unable to electronically transmit results from 11,000 polling stations. That's about a quarter of the total polling stations countrywide. Again, this is huge, huge number, which as it stands now, we do not know status of ability to transmit from those 11,000, because the new ones perhaps will be adding on to the numbers we already have. What we do know so far from even the statement today from IEBC to the Azimio team following their questions is that the Communications Authority has said 1,111 polling stations do not have connectivity. That's 3G and 4G. However, there's been that back and forth between the authority and the IEBC on who does the specific physical verification of network connectivity. So that's an area of concern. Again, if not dealt with in coming days, we'll see us get to the problems we witnessed in the last election. As of the 2017 petition, according to what was submitted by IEBC, the counties that were off 3G and or 4G coverage were the ones you're seeing on your screen there: Bomet, Bungoma, Busia, Homa Bay, Kajiado, Kericho, Kiambu, Kisumu, Kisii, Kirinyaga, Nyeri, Siaya, and Vihiga. Again, remember, each of these counties, there are multiple polling stations, so whereas the main cities within them may have connectivity, maybe the more rural areas that were of concern. So again, we'll be waiting to see whether as we go into the election, there will be clarity as to physical network coverage that has been tested and proven. Then there has been this hot button issue around state officers, and this also came up. State officers' involvement in politics, in campaigns, in expressing support for either a candidate or a political party. Now, when this issue came up, the petitioners had, according to their case and submissions before the Supreme Court, had sought for a declaration that the Section 23 of the Leadership and Integrity Act is be deemed unconstitutional. And these are the provisions of that section. An appointed state officer, other than a cabinet secretary or a member of a county executive committee, shall not, in the performance of their duties, act as an agent for or further the interest of a political party or candidate in an election, or manifest support for or opposition to any political party or candidate in an election. Before we move to the next board, something I want you to take note of, because this is where all the politicians, the state officers rather, have been going with, to the extent of their involvement in campaigns. That whereas this provision exists, look at that caveat, that other than a cabinet secretary, so the likes of CS Musharu, CS Matiang'i, CS Eugene Wamalwa, CS Munya, this particular provision does express itself to that extent. And if you go to the next board, again, more details regarding what this provision says, that unappointed state officer or public officer shall not engage in any political activity that may compromise or be seen to compromise the political neutrality of the office, subject to any laws relating to the elections. Now, when this matter came before the Supreme Court, this was the prayer by the petitioner. However, it was kicked out by the judges, because the prayer then was that this came up during oral submissions by the petitioner. And so the respondents argued that this was not a substantive prayer made in the petition, that when the petition issues were outlined by the petitioners, this was not outlined. It only came up during the matter as oral submission. And it was on that note that the judges then did not engage on this matter. So it could be argued it was kicked out on a technicality point. However, it is one of those that we've also been informing my conversation with CS, ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs, CS Joe Musharu. He's standing by for a conversation. We'll be talking about that and much more. And finally, these are just the other provisions that are outlined in that article. And without prejudice in the to the generality of subsection, a public officer shall not engage in the activities of any political party or candidate or act as an agent of a political party or candidate in an election, etc. And so for this evening, that's lay of the land. Some of these issues, as I've mentioned there, were witnessed in 2017. But the biggest concern now is, have those issues been cured? Has IEBC and the various stakeholders satisfied themselves that we'll not get ourselves as a country back into these problems? Because remember, just last week, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, IEBC had sought for some amendments. They'd proposed some amendments to the regulations governing conduct of elections to Parliament. They were all roundly thrown out. That means we are going into this election with the laws as they stood in 2017. And so we'll talk more about especially the connectivity and technology aspect as well with the CS. Stay with Checkpoint. We'll be right back after these few short messages.